So, thank you for joining us. I'm Sophia Kalantzakos, and today's conversation sits squarely within our Geopolitics and Ecology of Himalayan Water initiative. I'm delighted to welcome Alton Byers. Alton is a mountain geographer, conservationist, and a mountaineer specializing in applied research, high altitude ecosystems, climate change, and glacier hazards. And he joined the Institute for Arctic and Alpine Research at the University of Colorado Boulder in 2015 as Senior Research Associate and faculty. His most recent book, Khumbu Since 1950, is a unique collection of historic photographs of the Mountain Everest region that Byers has replicated over the years. Now, I want to just jump in. Tell us what happened. You've been warning about this kind of catastrophic flood for years. Can you walk us through what happened exactly on this region between Tibet and Nepal?
Yeah, I can try because we don't know exactly what happened yet. We're learning more and more as time goes by, and it seems to change with each hour. We're getting more and more insights as to what happened. But what we can say for sure is that this is different from your classic glacial lake outburst flood, which we've talked about in the past. That's where you have a glacial lake. And then an avalanche or landslide into the lake that creates a surge wave that breaches the terminal moraine and unleashes millions of cubic meters of water. In this case, that's not what happened. That's happened before in Nepal. But in this case, what we had was a massive breakage of ice and rock from the highest altitudes, above 7,000 meters on Langtang Lijung Peak. That's on the border, on the Nepal side, on the border with Nepal and Tibet, which plummeted down and in effect was the catalyst for a series of cascading events that happened after that. Okay. So in other words, you get the breakage. And to jump ahead, I think that the breakage was related to changes in permafrost. Even permafrost has become vulnerable to the impacts of warming trends. It is much less stable than it used to be. I call it the permafrost was the cryospheric glue that held these mountains together for millennia. And that, as in the lower altitudes, is being affected. So we're seeing more massive breakages of snow and ice and rock as well. I've seen cases where rock faces the size of the Empire State Building calved off suddenly and began the same series of processes, which in this case was plummeting down. Friction from contact with the air at that velocity causes melting of the ice. You get an increase in water. It hits the ground below. In other cases, we haven't seen this here yet, but you'll get a massive explosion. Hurricane force winds, trees leveled for thousands of hectares around you from the winds, and a fine coating of dust eventually settles down. This then went into the Botekosi River, blocked the river, backed up the river into a lake, which then, one way or the other, flooded. And then you got this horrendous release of millions of cubic meters of water that resulted in those horrific videos that you saw yesterday.
Yeah,
So
it was.
these events, again, they seem to be, I've been certainly monitoring these since at least 2012 with the flood in the Pokhara region that had pretty much almost the exact same sequence of events. And there have been a dozen others since then.
So, how long did all of that take to happen? I mean, they had no warning. It was not something that they could have predicted for the particular area. It's a very
Yeah.
important node that connects Nepal to Tibet. Um, how long? I mean, just normal people are trying to understand how quickly did these events occur?
Yeah, well, it happens very, very quickly. I mean, it's just a matter of hours or less from the initial breakage to the creation of what they call a hyper-concentrated slurry flood. Imagine liquid concrete uh, flowing down the river channel, releasing boulders the size of houses, and then blocking the lake. That could have taken a matter of hours, another 3, 4 hours, and then the release that was then very sudden, and that took, who knows, an hour, 45 minutes. I think these times will become clarified as we get better satellite imagery and better data from the field. But yeah, you're spot on in terms of you can't really predict these. You can identify areas of risk. You can, from remote sensing, you can see mountains that have similar overhanging ice, and you can make the logical assumption that they would be prone to breakage more than other areas. So you can do that. But really, the critical point, and that I'm starting to hear more and more from the Nepal press, is that, as horrible as this was, it was a catastrophic event. Otherwise, it's a glacier event to begin with, but it was a catastrophic event because it destroyed so many lives and infrastructure downstream.
Yeah.
But they were built on floodplains. Okay, Nepal has experienced this tremendous surge in unregulated, unplanned urbanization, with much of the building along the floodplains where they really shouldn't have been building. And I don't want to get into "I told you so" or "hindsight is 2020,"
No,
but
of course not.
but
Because also people have been living in these areas for a very long time, and it's just a
they,
question also of an expansion, as you're
it's
saying.
expansion and moving into dangerous areas. If you look at aerial photos from 50 years ago, you'll see that the villages in the area were up high. Okay,
Mhm.
agricultural fields may have been down by the river because that's where a lot of your fertile soil is, often
Mhm.
because of
Of
glacier
these.
floods and the deposition of sediment. But nobody was really living down along the rivers. So this is unfortunately a consequence of building in the wrong places, and
And
something
yes,
that I think
forgetting the wisdom of older generations who've lived with these rivers, with these glaciers for such a long time. And they know that even though this is a catastrophic event, similar events could happen from time to time. I also think, and really, if you could describe this for us, people who have not been in the region, and especially up in those mountains, can't comprehend the level of debris, the rocks that are coming down as boulders. People imagine
yeah.
mountains, I think, a little bit differently. Soft,
Mhm.
almost, I would say. But can you describe the landscape a little bit more to explain why there was so much kind of debris, rubble, stone coming down the mountain?
Yeah, well, it's extremely rugged, it's extremely vertical. It's an extremely dynamic environment, tectonically speaking, and also in terms of erosion. As mountains build, they also are eroding, and
Mm.
erosion takes the form of everything from soil loss to avalanches to debris flows to landslides. Okay, so it's an extremely rugged area to begin with a lot of stored material from previous glacial lake outburst floods or glacier floods historically in the past. So when you get a new one, you get the new flood picking up this older material in addition to everything that it's bringing down from higher up. And these also, I haven't heard this discussed yet, but in my research, these are terrifying events. I've interviewed people who say that you hear them, they sound like a moaning, somebody in agony, this loud moan that comes down the and sloshes back and forth along the river. And the smell is everything from a horrible smell to the smell of gunpowder. People repeat again
Really?
and again, smells like gunpowder. And that's probably because rocks are hitting, there's so many rocks hitting each other and sparking. And then this loud moaning thing is coming down, sloshing down, and it goes up high. It can go up to like 100 meters when it comes around the corner, and then it goes back down again. So even if you're high up, if you built high up, and you've seen this in some of the videos, you can be vulnerable to the impacts of a flood. And there have been described as absolutely terrifying. And you've seen the footage
Yes.
yesterday. That was the most horrific footage I personally have seen. And I happen to have footage of a number of these glacial lake outburst floods that we've collected over the years, but this was by far the largest.
So I want to ask you, I mean, of course, everybody is asking you, I'm imagining, and I'd actually like to hear a little bit about the way the media is representing this story. What are the main questions? I mean, we're
Hmm.
scholars. We started, this initiative in order to bring awareness and to point to the data and and share information. But
Yeah,
all of these events always have some kind of framing. Do
yeah,
you how is the media actually? What kinds of questions really concern them? And would you
yeah.
be redirecting if it were you asking the questions?
Uh-huh. Well, oddly enough, or interestingly enough, the main question that everybody is asking, and this is, NPR and New York Times and AP and National Geographic and, you name it. The
Mhm.
question they're asking is this related to climate change? That's
Mhm.
the number one question. And they want to know what kind of flood it was. They want to know how did it happen. They're not really clear about that because, it's a pretty complex process. And it's something that we really haven't been that aware of. Changes in the permafrost is to most scientists relatively new. Now, I do have colleagues that have been studying it for 20 or 30 years. Wilfred Haberle, University of Bern, and he and I wrote a piece for Kunda and the Nepali Times a year ago on what Kunda called the not so permanent permafrost. In other words, it's changing too. Okay. So those are the main questions. So it's basically, I've been leading people through a description of what the main triggering events of this cascading process were. I compare it to other floods that are almost identical that I've studied. um, I talk about the fact that we won't really know what the causes were for days or weeks or months because it takes time. First of all, we're directing our energy to rescue. That's where they should be directed.
Yes.
Now, when the rescue operations are over, then we'll have time to do the helicopter reconnaissance. That's you can gain another level of insight. Satellite helicopter reconnaissance. But to me, the most important thing is then getting on the ground, getting the scientists on the ground. And I have to stress acclimated scientists because you can't just fly up to 17,000 feet and think you're going to feel fine. At least for the first hour you will, but you won't after that because of
Yeah.
mountain sickness. You'll get acute, you have to acclimate to that altitude. But there is where you start to really peel the layers of the onion back and figure out what happened, often because local people who know the area have been there and can show you things that the satellites can't pick up and the helicopters can't pick up. And I know this is an area that's grazed by yak. I mean, I can see yak herders go up there just from the Google Earth photographs. And time and again, there it's the local people who are the ones who say, "Oh, look, that's what happened, that a third of that rock mountain broke off and cascaded down, and that's what caused the flood." So,
Because
you
they know
need
the
to,
terrain, they know what it looks like. They've
they
been
know
walking
the
it.
terrain. Exactly. They know all that. And so it's a process. So we're not really going to know for a long time. But a number of my colleagues are being very cautious and they're saying that they can't say definitively that it's related to climate change. And I respect that fully. But I'm also willing to take an additional step and say, based on my experience, certainly since around 2012, with our one of the first floods north of Pocono, almost identical to this, that killed 73 people. Identical processes that I would say that it is related to changes in permafrost, and that is directly related to warming trends that we've
So
experienced.
there's so many countries that share this mountain range, and
Yeah.
we'll leave the global community out of it. But even I mean, what did you think? And if you can comment on Nepal's response, what could they have done better? How could they better prepare? I mean, Nepal has this longstanding tradition of really going out there and doing the best possible with the least means perhaps possible in order uh, to rescue, search and rescue. And
Yeah.
the question is, I mean, this also affected China, but I guess in a different way. But
Hmm.
the question is, would you say that there is what kind of an approach did Nepal take? What is the takeaway? What could they have done better? Could China have, I don't want to say assisted more, but this is an interconnected region. Like, what could be a future joint plan? I don't know. I'm kind of
Yeah.
trying to figure out
Mm-hmm.
what an expert might think could be a solution to
Mm-hmm.
better cooperation, since all of these regions are interconnected and there will be
Yeah.
affected because there are glacial lakes everywhere now.
Right, right. Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. There are hundreds, thousands of glacial lakes in Tibet. That some of them are prone to catastrophic flooding,
Mhm.
in which case, and this has happened before, the flood
Mhm.
originates in Tibet, but the damage is done in Nepal.
Mhm.
So the need to increase communications between Nepal and the Chinese government has been a discussion that's been going on for years, and I think they're making progress. They're making good progress. Now, you couldn't have predicted this particular event. I don't think you can predict events like this. Glacial lakes, you can see, you can install an early warning system, you can set up mechanisms, help people with a preparedness plan. But this type of catastrophic event, I think, is impossible to predict. Now, you can, as I said earlier, identify areas that are high risk and start from there. But yeah, I really don't think what could have been done to prevent this? Because number one, again, we're back to all the building down in the
Right.
floodplains,
So that's
and
something that's preventable with some kind
that's
of,
preventable.
in some
That's
sense. I
preventable.
mean, these are all preventable, except they're not preventable.
Yeah,
The question
yeah,
is, I mean, now the government is going to have to deal with this. The media, the spotlight of the media is going to turn to something else. There's going to be some other catastrophe
yeah,
somewhere. How do we
right.
keep our attention? How do we stay on message? How do we stay focused? Because this part of the world is not it's not, out of it feels very far if you're sitting in New York or
Yeah,
if you're sitting in
yeah.
a capital in Europe. But it
Hmm.
really is a very central region because everything, all the rivers, the great rivers of Asia come from this region. Um,
Right.
all of these nations they have a huge populations. What do you foresee? What are your thoughts as a scientist and a person who's collaborated with scientists of other countries in the region?
Hmm.
How can we keep our focus on this area?
Well, I think we have a very good start with the fact that Nepal has developed just an excellent cadre of scientists, of glaciologists in the last
Mhm.
15, 20 years or so. First class, world-class glaciologists, as well as organizations like the Department of Hydrology and Meteorology, ICIMAD, International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, Kathmandu University. So really, they're on the leading edge. And the Chinese, too. If you look at the peer-reviewed papers being produced about glaciers and glacier hazards, China is in the lead, as is Nepal. So we've got a foundation of support now that we didn't have 10 years or 15 years ago. So that's a pretty good start right there. The government is new, they're being tested, they're young, they're out there now showing what they can do in terms of rescue and relief. I think after that, you're going to see more attention turned to these very difficult problems of how do we how do we encourage zoning or discourage building in places that are especially prone to floods? And it's going to be very difficult, but the challenge is changing human awareness and human behavior, and it can be done. Just recently, we're working now with the Kanchenjunga Conservation Area, the Management Council of the conservation area in Kanchenjunga. That's the fifth highest mountain in the world. And for the last 2 years, we've been working with them to develop a glacier hazard management plan and community preparedness plan. And just recently the management council wanted to build their $500,000 visitor center down by the river, which we were able to show had historically been covered by a glacial lake outburst flood back in 1963. You can retrace the history of floods using remote sensing, oral testimony, interviews, and other things. And it took a while, but they have now agreed to move the location from that area up to higher ground and closer to a community, so the community can take advantage of it. So yeah, we change can happen. And that's what we're hoping will happen with the community glacier hazard preparedness plan, which again is based on things such as get out of the way, don't build down in the historically flooded areas, or there are ways to divert floods by using rock-filled cages called gabions, or build higher. We've already seen that happen. If one hotel was washed away by a flood, as it was in the Burun in 2017, within 3 weeks they had built higher, and they're thriving now. They don't have the risk of a glacier flood again. So yeah, change is possible, but it's going to be slow.
This is a very particular area too, because apparently it's like a passageway for pilgrims who are moving from one point to another.
Yeah. Hmm.
Trekking is happening there. Um, it is an area that will continue to be visited. It has a very
Yeah.
special importance, cultural, spiritual, yeah, even, I don't know,
Yeah.
I don't want to say
Right.
tourist, but it is a very vibrant community. So you think that it can go back into a rebuild mode, even though something so catastrophic has happened in the
Oh
particular
yeah.
area, if they take some of these measures that you've mentioned. Um, okay, I guess I know you're really busy, and I thank you so much for your time.
Oh,
I just want to ask
yeah.
you something. I feel as if
Mm-hmm.
the global, I mean, we talk a lot about geopolitics, and it feels as if global attention is now moved to, I mean, the geopolitical climate is very contentious at the moment. We
Mm-hmm.
see that so many investments in security and militarization. We're
Mm-hmm.
having the defunding of science in some parts of the
Yeah.
world. And the question is, it feels as if this is the moment when we should be doing our utmost, and it feels as if we're distracted by
Mm-hmm.
other, I would almost say man-made crises that really don't
Uh,
address this overwhelming crisis, which is the climate problem. Um, as
right.
a scientist, are you feeling that there is like a lack of interest? Is there continued funding in your field? Who is doing the funding? Is it more private? Is it more government? Is it Europe? I know the United States is, you know, having a whole conversation about what's being funded or not. Is
Yeah.
China doing the funding? Where do we stand in terms of that? And is it just science that we need to,
Right.
we understand the science to a very large degree. How else can we move the needle politically and geopolitically?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that the Europeans and the Canadians and the Chinese and Nepalis and the rest of the world, they're moving ahead.
Mm.
We may have some challenges now in the U.S. in terms of funding and the political agenda for sure. Everybody was hurt by the funding. I mean, USAID was disbanded. They were a major donor for some of our earlier work in Nepal and Peru from
Mm.
2009 to 2015. National Science Foundation funded our work. They were hit as well. Fulbright, got
Yes.
affected. So everybody's had their grants taken away, and it's been a challenge in terms of funding. And we hope that will change with time. Meanwhile, we do the best we can. We continue getting funding wherever we can, and we continue the work because the work is very, very important.
Thank you so much. Is there another message you'd like to leave us with? Something to think about
Oh,
as we think about
um,
what happened,
ah,
the lives
yeah,
lost, the destruction, but also just to stay in the moment, stay present in what is happening and is probably going to be happening again and again in the future.
yeah. It's going to happen again and again. We will see that. More events of this nature are going to happen. But I don't want to end with a message of doom and gloom because I don't believe that. Because, we are resilient. We can adapt. I think we just need to pay a little more attention to using good science, just like you alluded to a moment ago. We need good science. We need sharing the results with local people. We need good practical preparedness plans. And that's the way that and smart building, smart construction, not building in areas that are guaranteed to flood. So yeah, it looks pretty bad right now. It was horrific what happened, but I think it's not all doom and gloom. That we have a way forward that can help mitigate all these adverse impacts. But we live in a time of warming, it's the world is changing and we need to figure out how to adapt to it, and we will.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for this conversation. We really, really appreciate it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Take care.